Okay, good morning everybody, and Hazak Ubaru. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday morning as we are studying a Perashat together, Perashat Vayelech. And honestly, we didn't really have so much time this week to discuss because, of course, we were talking about Rosh Hashanah, and then we had Rosh Hashanah the last couple of days, and yesterday we spoke a little bit about Aseret Yemei Teshuvah. So here we are, Friday morning, and we're going to talk a little bit about our Perashat Vayelech. Of course, there's a lot to talk about, so I may combine today a few different Dvar Torahs in one, so I apologize if they don't all connect. But that's what happens when you only have one day to talk about the Perashah. And here we go, we're jumping right in. The words begin, Vayelech Moshe. And Moses went. Our Perashah begins with the word to go. Vayelech Moshe, and Moses goes. Where does he go? Where did he go? He goes, he goes and he speaks these words to all of Israel. Now right away, we have to ask, was it so necessary to tell me that Moshe went to the people to speak to them? I mean, did it ever say that? We don't ever have the introduction. And Moses got up in the morning and he did Netilat Yadayim and he said Modeh Ani and he washed his hands and he put on his clothes and he went to the people and he told them, okay, yes, get to the point. Every time the Torah tells us that Moses spoke to the people, all it says is Vaydaber Moshe el Bnei Israel. All of a sudden, our Parashah finds it necessary to tell us, by the way, you should just know that Vayelech Moshe, he also went and he said these words. Right? Well, yes, I don't need you to tell me that he went. I obviously know that. That's assumed. It's given. You don't have to tell me. You just say that he said it. What is the Torah adding with the word Vayelech Moshe? And Moshe went. Rabbi Bernstein over here brings a beautiful idea. We know that Moshe was the most humble person that ever lived, right? Okay, I'm number 2. But after Moshe, right? Before me is Moshe. Okay, and it's very interesting. Moshe was very modest, very humble, correct? And it's interesting that he could write such a thing. Of course, he didn't write it. God told him to write it. But where does it say it? Anyone know which Perashat says that Moshe was the most humble person? It's written actually in the context of when his brother and sister spoke gossip about him. And Moshe was very humble. Very good, Miriam. End of Perashat Ba'alotecha. It says over here, chapter 12, Pasuk 3, book of Numbers. Ve'ha'ish Moshe anav me'od. And the man Moses, by the way, was very humble. Mikol ha'adam, from any man asher pnei adama, that walked the face of the earth. Moshe was the most humble person that ever lived. And I think if you ask most people, who was the most humble person, everyone will answer, Moshe. Are they wrong? Can't be wrong. That's what it says in the Pasuk. However, the Pasuk actually, the word anav, if I ask you how to spell anav, what would you say? Anyone know how to spell anav? Humble? How do you spell it? Ayin, Nun, Yod, Vav. Right? It really comes to the word ani, poor. A poor person is not arrogant. Poor person realizes that they have nothing to be arrogant about. Anav comes from ani. Well, if you look in this pasuk, when Moses was very humble, the most humble, the word anav is actually written lacking. It says ayin, nun, vav. There's no yud. And our rabbis say, because that was actually, Moshe's humility was incomplete. He was very humble, but there was actually somebody more humble than him. Who could be more humble than Moshe? Anyone know? Give it a couple of seconds. Who is more humble than Moshe? The answer? Shemuel HaNavi. The prophet Shemuel was more humble. Well, Hashem is not a person, but yes, that's a good guess. Not Avraham. Shemuel was the most humble. Why? Because whereas Moshe, when he would speak to the people, they would all come to him, but Shemuel would go to the people. As an example, the pasuk says, "Utshuvato haramata." Once a year, he would come home to Ramah. But throughout the year, you know where Shmuel was? Not home. He was traveling the country on tour, going to visit and help and assist and aid and guide and judge the people, helping them for what they needed. Now, it would have been very understandable for Shemuel to sit home and say, if you have a question, come and I'll answer it. But Shemuel, out of his humility, didn't make the people come to him. Rather, he went to the people. So take a look, Rabotai. This is tremendous humility. Moshe would make the people come to him, and Shemuel would go to the people. Now, that's why Moshe technically is not the most humble. So we leave out the yud from the word anav, because his humility was quite lacking. The obvious question that we're all thinking of right now, so that he's not the most humble. So how could you write that he's the most humble and leave out a yud and now it makes it okay? It's like such a lie. It's like a wink. Moshe is the most humble person, leaving out a yud. Like, you can't do that. Is he the most humble or is he not the most humble? If he is the most humble, then you write it. And if he's not, you can't just write it and then leave out a yud and then it makes it okay. It seems like Moshe wasn't the most humble person, so then you can't just leave out a yud and justify the fact that you wrote that he's the most humble person. But the answer, Rabotai, is that we know that there are certain people in relationships that we have to respect. As an example, let's think about somebody that you have to respect. Who's someone that we have to respect? We have to respect our parents. We have to respect elders. We have to respect rabbis. We have to respect a king. Now, the question is, are those people allowed to forego their honor? I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm a parent and I'm usually, my son must stand up when I walk in the room. Am I allowed to forego that and tell him, don't stand up for me? Let's say a rabbi of a community says, listen, when I come in, no one stand up for me. Is he allowed to do that? Am I allowed to say to my child, I let you sit in my seat? You're allowed to call me by my name? Am I allowed to do those things? So the answer is, in any relationship, if you want to forego, you're allowed. Very good, Nathan. But a king cannot. Melech shemahal al kevodo, en kevodo machul. If a king forgoes his honor is not forgiven. A king is the exception. Everyone else can. I'm allowed a father, a mother, a rabbi. Everybody's allowed, but not a king. Why not? Why is a king different? Because really, if you think about it, the king's honor is not his own. King represents the people, represents his nation. So if you belittle the king, you're belittling the kingdom. You're belittling all the community. You're belittling the world, the nation. And therefore, he doesn't have the right to forego their honor. He represents them. And therefore, he has to hold himself to a certain standard. And therefore, a king cannot forego on behalf of the people. It's just impossible to do. And if that's the case, we now understand why Moshe couldn't go to the people to judge them. Because Moshe was called a king. Moshe had the status of a king. Vayhi bishurun melech. And therefore, the people had to come to him. So therefore, technically, Shmuel was more humble in practice. Because he practically did more humbling things. He went to the people. But conceptually, Moshe was the most humble because he couldn't. Moshe did the most that he could. If he could have, he would have. But he couldn't. And therefore, the people had to come to him. It's interesting to note that in Perashat Vayakel, second to last Perashah of the book of Exodus, it says, Vayakel Moshe, Moshe gathered the people, and he commanded them about all the details of building what? Anyone know? Building the Mishkan. Okay? It says, Vayakel Moshe, Moshe gathered the people to him. Right? Again, opposite of Shmuel. Shmuel went to the people, Moshe gathered the people to him, which makes sense. However, Rashi says right in the beginning of the Perashah, Vayakel Moshe, Lemaharat Yom Kippurim. By the way, just FYI, this was right after Yom Kippur. Why is Rashi got to tell me that? Since when does Rashi tell us the date of the event that he's commenting on. Rashi doesn't do that. Rashi tells us pshat. What does it say? He doesn't tell us, by the way, you want the date of... It doesn't usually tell us the date. Figure it out. I don't know. Go look in other books. I'm here to tell you what the pasuk is saying. Over here, Rashi finds it important to tell us the timing of this phrase. Vayakel Moshe. But the answer is very clear and beautiful. We know that the Moshe, although he was a king, he kind of lost that status. Because you're only a king if you have a people. You're only as great as your community. But what happens if your community stops being a community? What if your nation is no longer a nation? What if your nation becomes slaves? Are you still a king? You're not a king, right? When the Jewish people did Chet HaEgel, they dropped from their level. God tells Moshe by Chet HaEgel, Lech Red, quickly go down the mountain because your nation have become corrupt. And the words Lech Red, go down, are superfluous. If you're on a mountain, you don't need to tell the guy go down. You just need to say go. Because guess what? There's only one direction from the top of a mountain. South. You only can go down. God didn't need to say to Moshe, go down. He should have just said go. Go to the people. Why did he say go down to the people? The answer is because God was hinting to Moshe, you are also in status going to drop. Till now you were a king, but no more, because the people fall and the leader is only as great as the people allow him to be. If the people drop their level, then you drop your level. And so Moshe wasn't a king anymore. And so technically, we should ask, why did Moshe gather the people to him? If he's so humble, he should have done now like Shemuel and go to them. Why did he bring them to him? Vayakel Moshe. And Rashi answers the question by saying this was right after Yom Kippur. They got forgiven for Chet HaEgel. And therefore, Moshe is back king. Right? Oh, I just can't wait to be king. Right? Moshe is a king again, and therefore, he can no longer forgive. Vayakel Moshe. He has to gather them to him. Stunning, right? Beautiful. Baruch Hashem. However, Rabotai, with all this, we now ask a question in our parasha. Vayelech Moshe. All of a sudden we read that Moshe in our parasha acts and he practices and he adopts Shmuel's practice of going. Vayelech Moshe. All of a sudden, for the last 40 years, the people came to him. All of a sudden, Vayelech Moshe. He went to them. What happened? How did Moshe go to the people? Shouldn't go to the people. They should come to him if he's a king. But our rabbis tell us, if you look by David HaMelech, it says that David, at the end of his life, he got very cold, and they looked for clothing to warm him up. And it says, it refers to the king David HaMelech just as David. Right? Vayasef David elamav. David, David, David. All of a sudden, the word HaMelech David doesn't appear in the episode of his death. Our rabbis say there's a very famous rule: En shilton beyom hamavet. There's no sovereignty on the day of death. On a person's last day, no matter how rich, no matter how powerful, no matter how cool, no matter how king, no matter how whatever, on the day of death, there's no power. On a person's last day, they relinquish any strength and power they have. So in a way, David HaMelech on his last day is not a melech. He technically is, but he's not practicing anymore as a king. By the way, I'll bring you a nice example to this. It says in Perashat Shemot, Moshe ran away, and it says that the king Paro died. Paro died. And the people started crying, and they complained, because usually when a new king comes into power, they are trying to gain public appeal. Think about a president. Think about any position. When he's trying to come and be elected, he's saying, look, I'm going to do this, I'm going to help that, I'm going to make the country better. In the beginning, just to gain the people's love. They always begin positive. After he owns the people and they are under his wing, now maybe he's maybe relinquishing some of his duties and he's negligent. But in the beginning, a king, whoever, is on top of the game. All of a sudden, a new king comes, and the decrees are the same. The problems are still there. Nothing changed. So the people start crying. And Hashem heard their cries, and He redeemed them. And that we know. But what's very interesting is that our rabbis say there's a machloket. Some say that what happened to Paro? The pasuk says Paro died. Some rabbis say he actually died, but some rabbis say actually he didn't die. He had tzara'at. He got afflicted with leprosy. And he slaughtered Jewish babies to bathe in their blood. Parminan. Rabotai, I mean, we say that just like as if it was something, but just try to internalize that for 1 second. Could you imagine killing children and then bathing in their blood? Hashem Yishmor. So the question is, if the pasuk says that Paro died, why do our rabbis come and say, no, he didn't die, he just got leprosy? Even though Metzorah is chashuv kemet, someone with leprosy is considered one of the 4 people that are considered dead. But why did you take the pasuk out of its simple understanding? Simply, he died. So why you got to tell me that, he didn't die? And the answer is, if you look in the pasuk in chapter 2, pasuk 23. Vahi bayamim harabim ahem, vayamot melech Mizrahim. The pasuk calls him a melech. How could he be a king on the day of death? And because of that, our rabbis come and say he didn't actually die. He got tzara'at. Unbelievable. All of this, that's the Gaon of Vilna. All of this comes back to Moshe Rabbeinu. What's the date of this conversation that Moshe is having with the Jewish people? Vayelech Moshe. When does this take place? When does this speech take place? The pasuk says, next pasuk, Vayomer Alehem, he says to them, Ben me'ah ve'esrim shana anochi hayom. I am today 120. Moshe's birthday. We are reading right now, we enter the parasha of Moshe's last day of his life. So from here, and Ha'azinu and Vezot HaBeracha are all on day 1 of his 120th birthday, his 120th year. This is the last day of Moshe's life. And he says to them, Hayom, Rashi says, Mel'u yamai ushnotai, bayom ze noladi, bayom ze amut. Moshe was hinting to the people, I am 120 today. Today I was born. Today I will pass away. And so Moshe is on the day of his death. And if what we said is true, En shilton beyom hamavet, Moshe Rabbeinu is no longer a king, so to speak. And therefore, today, he is allowed to forego any honor that he demands and deserves. And therefore, the pasuk says, Vayelech, Moshe goes to the people. He could have made them come to him. For 40 years they came to him, and it would have been completely understandable if Moshe would have demanded a little bit of respect. He's an old man. I have one more message, so please come to my tent so I could all speak to you one last time. Completely understandable. Nobody would judge Moshe at all. But that is the humility of Moshe. 40 years he was working for the people and he went to them. But he always remembered that I'm only doing it because I have to. For 40 years I'm making them come to me because I don't have another choice. The second I'm able to, Moshe jumped on that opportunity. Such was his humility. So these are the words, Vayelech Moshe. Again, beautiful, beautiful thoughts, just from 2 words. One word, Vayelech. Who would have ever thought? We move on now to the middle of the parasha, and we really read of the climactic incident. Very sad, actually. Right here, same chapter, just a few psukim later, pasuk number Yud Dalid. Pasuk 14. Rabotai, so sad as we read the pasuk, we want to cry. We feel like we live with Moshe because we've read so much and we learned so much about him and we're with him all day long. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, God says to Moses, Hen karevu yamecha lamut. Your time to die has come. And call Joshua and let him stand in front of you so that I can command him. And the episode continues. And this word, this sentence, hen karevu yamecha lamut. Behold, your days have drawn to an end. There's a midrash here that our rabbis come and say something very, very powerful. Our rabbis give a mashal to a man that gives a king a gift. And he gives the king a beautiful sword. Beautiful jewels and pearls all over. And he hands the sword to the king. The king thanks him, and he turns to his guard and he hands the sword and he says to his guard, I want you to take this sword and chop this man's head off with it. And our rabbis say, this is exactly what's going on in our parasha. You see, Moshe says to God, really? Is hen karevu yamecha lamut? Are you really going to say that word hen about me? That my time has come to an end? Didn't I praise you with hen ladonai Elohecha hashamayim ushmei hashamayim? Didn't I use the word hen, behold, to praise you? Everybody, behold, God is the master of the heavens and the heavens of the heavens. And God, you use that very word hen to decree my death? Just imagine you give a king a sword and then the king kills the man with that very sword. Is that fair, God? It's a good question. Where's the appreciation? And Hashem answers Moshe very interesting, very surprising. He says, Moshe, you're a bad neighbor. Well, what does that mean, a bad neighbor? God says to Moshe, when I sent you to redeem Israel, you told me, hen lo ya'aminu li. You said they won't believe me, and you used the word hen. And so now, I am using the word hen, yes, to stamp your death. This is the end of the midrash, and it's an amazing midrash. God says to Moses, behold, you will die. And Moses said, hey, it's not fair. I said, behold, God is the master of the heavens. And then God said back, yes, but you also said, behold, they won't believe in me. Is this a word game? Are we playing some charade? What's going on over here? The Torah Tamimah says something beautiful. The word hen means indeed. Hen is not just behold, behold, behold in English. Hen means with certainty, without a shadow of a doubt, 100% sure. Indeed. And now we look at the dialogue, says the Torah Tamimah, and we understand on a deeper level. You see, Moshe knew that sooner or later he's going to die. Everyone's going to die. But he was taken aback that God would use the word hen. Hen karevu yamecha lamut. Indeed, you're going to die. Really? Such a certain verdict? I will die? There's no appeal? I can't pray possibly to remove and extend my life a little bit? Do I really deserve hen? I deserve to die eventually, but do I deserve that there could be no discussion, end of discussion, case closed, period? Why? Why can't we put a comma? After all, I used the word hen for you. I used hen praising you. How could you use hen to just stamp and give me a death sentence? And there's no appeal. Don't talk to me about it. Case closed. And God's answer to Moshe is, yes, Moshe, it's true. You did praise me. But remember, you also used the word hen about people. You used the word hen about the Jewish people. And you said that they're on a low level. And they're not going to believe in you. You had no faith in the people. You see, Moshe, we're allowed to speak of God in certainty. We're allowed to use the word hen when it comes to Hashem. Indeed, God is the master. But we can never be certain of men. We can never be certain of people. It is easier to know God than it is to know man. You are a bad neighbor if you think that the people will not believe you. If you think and you've given up hope on them. If you say with certainty that X and Y and Z are bad or they will not change. If you think you can project the path and trajectory of a Jew, of a person, of a human being, that they will take in life. We never know what path anyone will take in life. To have said indeed about me is fine. But to say indeed about people, to write somebody off, to assume that you know that they're going to be bad. How many times in our lives we think certain people, or maybe we're in a fight with someone and we're suggested, we're encouraged, go apologize, make amends, and we say, no, I know them. They're never going to apologize. I know them. They'll never forgive me. I know them. They don't have a good bone in their body. I know them. They're horrible. I know. We never know people. Says Rav Salanter, how sad that people are so certain of themselves and they doubt God. It should be the opposite. We should be certain of God and we should doubt and question ourselves. The Midrash is teaching us, Rabotai, a very powerful lesson. And a lesson that pertains to us, especially in this time of the year. Man is not predictable. We cannot determine people's actions. We cannot determine what choices people will make. We have free will at the end of the day. No matter how bad they were till now, no matter how many wrong things we did till now, from now forward, never use the word hen on a person. Never say indeed. We should never be sure of people. We could always question people, for the good or for the bad. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot, Hakol tzafui vehareshut netuna. We saw this when we learned Pirkei Avot back then. Hakol tzafui. Everything is seen by God. God knows all. God sees all. Right now on Rosh Hashanah, as we're praying for a year and we're promising God that we're going to be better, God knows what we're going to do next year. He sees the future. God is above time. Time moves differently for him. He's above time. So he sees all. However, Mishnah continues, Hareshut netuna. We have free choice. We can change it. And maybe Hashem knows what that change is going to be. But that's not the point. No matter what the future brings, we can change it last second. Nothing is for certain. Nothing in life is predictable. At least not man. And our rabbis say in the Gemara something very powerful. Le'olam yihiyu b'nei adam be'enecha. A person should always see other people. Kelistim. When you see people, assume the worst. Suspect them of the worst. Vechabdehu keRabban Gamliel. And at the same time, respect them like Rabban Gamliel. Respect and suspect. Remember that at all times, people are capable of being the biggest crooks. The nicest guy, biggest tzaddik, can be a crook in a second. And therefore be careful. Always be careful. Always just be cautious. But always remember that they could be Rabban Gamliel and they could reach heights of the biggest rabbi. Respect everybody. Give them the respect as if they could be, because they can be. Because we can never tell how someone will turn out. They can be Rabban Gamliel and they can be the biggest thief. Suspect them and respect them, because we don't know. We never know what untapped potential lies in other people. Our rabbi said it best, Al ta'amin be'atzmecha ad yom motcha. Don't trust yourself until the day of death. That means a person can never be sure. Never say hen. Never say indeed. Oh, it's okay. I know this person for the last 50 years. This is them. They're not going to change. Never be sure of yourself, in good or bad. Oh, I know myself. I could trust myself with that person. I could trust myself with money in a closed room. No matter how many years, we are never allowed. There's a sin called yichud. I don't know if you're familiar with the laws of yichud. Yichud is to be in isolation with someone of the opposite gender. We're not allowed to be in a closed room with somebody that we're not allowed to be married to. So if there's a lady who's married, she cannot be with a man in a room. If there's a man that's married, cannot be with a lady in a room. That's a sin called yichud. Even if they don't touch, even if they're learning Gemara the whole time, it doesn't matter. Why? because it's a precaution to prevent something from going on in that room. If it's a closed room, the doors are locked, nobody's coming in, don't trust yourself. And these laws of yichud apply even if you're 20 and good looking, or if you're 95 and not good looking. It's irrelevant. Yichud is yichud, and it's a sin for any age. Al ta'amin ba'atzmecha. We can never be positive. They could have been a tzaddik their whole life, and the Gemara tells us there was a big rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol. His whole life was a tzaddik, and the last day became an apostate, became a kofir, an atheist. Imagine, could you imagine, 80 years, and he dropped it all. And you could have the opposite. 80 years, a person could do the biggest sins. Like the famous episode of Elazar ben Durdaya, his whole life was going around from lady to lady, doing all the sins possible. All of a sudden he had a last second of a change of heart, and he died that day, and he did his shuvah that day. And Rabbi said the famous words, Yesh koneh olamo b'sha'ah achat. A person could earn eternity in 1 hour. So no matter where a person is, no matter what path they have taken, we can never assume, never know for sure what a person is going to do. Suspect and respect. Trust, yet verify. Very good, Nathan. That is what it is. Rabotai. And that's what we learned from the Ben Sorer Umoreh, by the way. The wayward child. All of the clues, all of the arrows pointing this way. Torah says, kill him. But our rabbis say, guess what? But it never happened. And that's the lesson. The lesson is that we can never know for sure. And Baruch Hashem, we look around the world, how many Baal Tshuvas, how many people that have started off on the wrong foot, and today they're amazing. Today they're in a different place. You know, the halakha tells us that if a man says to a lady, Hareat mekudeshet li, behold, you are sanctified, married to me. Behold, you are married. With this ring, or with this coin, on condition that I'm a tzaddik. What's the halakha? And she accepts the ring. What's the halakha? Are they married or no? He's not a tzaddik because let's say 5 seconds ago the guy was eating ham with cheese in the bathroom on Yom Kippur. And then he turns to the lady a minute later. By the way, will you marry me on condition that I'm a tzaddik? Says very good. Besafek mikudeshet. Why? Shema hirher teshuva. Could you imagine? Because maybe he had a last second remorse. Maybe he thought for a change of heart, split second of teshuvah, boom. And therefore our rabbis tell us, Al tehi baz lechol adam. Never despise anybody. Never look at someone who's a loser, who's a lowlife, and think and disrespect them because, what will I need from that person? They're nobody. They don't make money. They're not important. They don't have a job. They're like the Hazik case in the shul. They're the people in the community that no one really likes. They're not popular. What do I need you for? Never say hen about somebody. We never know. We never know when we may need somebody. What good could come from them? Who are you? En lecha adam she'en lo sha'a. Everybody has their moment. Everybody has their hour. Sha'a means an hour, but you know what else sha'a means? What else does sha'a mean? Sha'a also means to turn. Like it says by Cain, El minhato lo sha'a. God did not turn to Cain's korban. And so what our rabbis say is, She'en adam she'en lo sha'a. There's no such thing as a person who cannot turn. Anyone can turn in a second. A person could be driving and boom, make a U-turn. And therefore, never despise anyone. Never look at somebody and just laugh at them or mock them. We never know. We never know when people could come in handy. We never know when a person will be bad or a person will be good. Rabbi Tai, I want to read to you a story that we've probably read before, but I always love reading it right before Yom Kippur. It's a book from Yafa Elyach's book, Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. And this story is about the Bluzhever Rebbe in the Janowska road camp, there was a brigadier by the name of Schneeweiss. Okay, and maybe you heard this from me before, and I apologize if you did. But Schneeweiss was a Jew, and you avoided him if you were in the camps. He was a self-hating Jew. He knew the Levava Rabbi Spira from before, but he wasn't aware that the Rebbe was actually in the camp with him because of his changed appearance. Only a few Hasidim knew that the rabbi was the rabbi. They kept their identity hidden because if the Nazis knew that you were the rabbi, they would torture you, they would mock you, they would make you break halakha in front of all of the other Jews. So they kept his identity hidden. Well, Yom Kippur was approaching, and everyone knew that the Germans liked to use the holidays as days for inflicting terror and death. In Janowska, a handful of old-timers remembered large selections on Simchat Torah and Purim. Erev Kippur, the tensions and the fears were at their height. A few Hasidim came to the rabbi of Bluzhov and asked him to approach Schneeweiss and request that on Yom Kippur his group not be assigned to any of the 39 main categories of work, so that their transgression of the law by working on Yom Kippur would not be a major one. The rabbi was very moved by the request of his Hasidim, and despite his fears, he went to Schneeweiss, knowing that he would have to disclose his identity. He knew quite well that Schneeweiss did not have much respect for the Jewish tradition. Even before World War II, he publicly violated the Jewish holidays and transgressed against Jewish law. Here in Janowska, he was a cruel man who knew no mercy. With a heavy heart, the rabbi went before Schneeweiss. You probably remember me. I am the rabbi of Prachnik, Rabbi Yisrael Spira. Schneeweiss did not respond. You are a Jew like myself, continued the rabbi. Tonight is Kal Nidre night. There is a small group of young Jews who do not want to transgress any of the 39 main categories of work. It means everything to them. It is the essence of their existence. Can you do something about it? Can you please help us? The rabbi noticed that a hidden shiver went through Schneeweiss as he listened to the rabbi's strange request. The rabbi took Schneeweiss's hand and said, I promise you, as long as you live, it will be a good life. I beg you to do it for us so that we may still find some dignity in our humiliating existence. The stern face of Schneeweiss changed. For the first time since his arrival at Janowska, there was a human spark in it. I can't do anything tonight, said Schneeweiss. I have no jurisdiction over the night brigade. But tomorrow on Yom Kippur I will do for you whatever I can. The rabbi shook Schneeweiss's hand in gratitude and left. Well, that night they were taken to work near the Lvov cemetery. To this day, the rabbi has scars from the beatings of that night. In the morning, just fast forwarding a little bit in the story. In the morning, the rabbi and a small group of young Hasidim were summoned to Schneeweiss's cottage. I heard that you prayed last night. I don't believe in prayers, said Schneeweiss. On principle, I even oppose them. But I admire your courage. For you all know well that penalty for prayer in Janowska is death. With that, he motioned to the rabbi and his Hasidim to follow him. He took them to the SS quarters in the camp to a large wooden house. You fellows will shine the floor without any polish or wax. And you, rabbi, will clean the windows with dry rags, so that you will not transgress any of the 39 main categories of work. He left the room abruptly without saying another word. The rabbi was standing on a ladder with rags in his hand, cleaning the huge windows while chanting prayers, and his companions were on the floor polishing the wood and praying with him. The floor was wet with our tears. You can imagine the prayers of that Yom Kippur, said the rabbi to the Hasidim who were listening to his tale while he was wiping away a tear. At about 12 o'clock noontime, the door opened wide, and into the room stormed two angels of death, SS men in their black uniforms. May their names be obliterated. They were followed by a food cart filled to capacity. Noontime, time to eat bread, soup, and meat, announced one of the two SS men. The room was filled with an aroma of freshly cooked food, such food as they had not seen since the German occupation. white bread, steaming hot vegetable soup, and huge portions of meat. The tall SS man commanded in a high-pitched voice, "You must eat immediately, otherwise you will be shot on the spot." None of them moved. The rabbi remained on the ladder, the Hasidim on the floor. The German repeated the orders. The rabbi and the Hasidim remained glued to their places. The SS men called in Schneeweiss. "Schneeweiss, if the dirty dogs refuse to eat, I will kill you along with them." Schneeweiss pulled himself to attention, looked the German directly in the eyes, and said in a very quiet tone, "We Jews do not eat today. Today is Yom Kippur, our most holy day, the Day of Atonement." "You don't understand, Jewish dog," roared the taller of the two. "I command you in the name of the Führer and the Third Reich, fress, eat!" Schneeweiss composed his head high, repeated the same answer. "We Jews obey the law of our tradition. Today is Yom Kippur, a day of fasting." The German took out his revolver from its holster and pointed it at Schneeweiss's temple. Schneeweiss remained calm. He stood still, at attention, his head high. A shot pierced the room. Schneeweiss fell. On the freshly polished floor, a puddle of blood was growing bigger and bigger. The rabbi and the Hasidim stood as if frozen in their places. They could not believe what their eyes had just witnessed. Schneeweiss, the man who in the past had publicly transgressed against Jewish tradition, had sanctified God's name publicly and died a martyr's death for the sake of the Jewish honor. "Only then on that Yom Kippur in Janauska," said the rabbi to his Hasidim, "that I understand the meaning of the statement in the Talmud. Even the transgressors in Israel are as full of good deeds as a pomegranate is filled with seeds." Never do we ever say hen about a person. It could be Schneeweiss, it could be the biggest Rasha. But we make a very big mistake if we think we can know with certainty what path a Jew will take. Hakol tzafui v'hareshut netuna. We may think everything, we could see everything, but people have free will. And even the biggest wicked person, the biggest Rasha, last second, can make a tiny change and can become a tzaddik that died a martyr's death. Our prayer is that by using our free will and by turning to Hashem, He will use the word hen, but not for death, not to issue a verdict of death, but like we say in the Musaf prayers, hen ga'alti etchem aharit kereshit. Indeed, I will redeem you like I have done in the earlier days. We should be zocheh to a full redemption. We'll stop over here. Have a Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.